Good morning, dear friends. I will talk on space science and technology. In fact, whenever we talk about the space, generally we always look toward the sky. And particularly in the night time, we always stare the sky where we'll see billions and billions of stars. Also, our galaxy and sometimes with the aid of telescopes, etc., other galaxies. And particularly, we always amaze the planets. And but at the same time, we have many questions in mind. For example, the first question comes in mind is what is a space? Where it is located? Or we generally ask from where the space starts, whether the space begins just above the surface of the earth or it is at certain height or above the Himalaya. Generally, when we see in the sky, we see billions of stars in which our sun, along with its family known as solar system, is also embedded. We see in this sky a belt of dust, gas, but it is bright because of large number of stars. And that belt is a part of our galaxy known as Milky Way. We have many other questions like how large this universe is, whether in this whole universe we are alone or life is elsewhere also. There are amazing questions, and particularly when our children and grandchildren ask questions, we really are stunned with that how to address this question. Friends, in my today's presentation, I would like to address few questions of this millions of questions. For example, first of all, I would like to address the where is actually the space begins. You can see in my this picture, the right side, there is a plot, and in this plot, on the x-axis, there are many quantities which I am showing by different colors. For example, the temperature, pressure, sound speed, density, etc. And on the y-axis, it is the altitude, that is height above the surface of the earth. You can see all the quantities on the right side, they are keep on increasing as we go down and down, that is toward the surface of the earth. Pressure is increasing, density is increasing, even temperature also is very high when we reach toward the surface of the earth, and sound speed is also very high. But you will note that as we go up, and particularly the about say 20 kilometer, almost density and pressure are negligible, very close to zero. But on the other hand, two other quantities, temperature and sound speed, they first decrease up to say 30 kilometer above the surface of the earth, but then again they increase. This is a surprising phenomena in our atmosphere. You know very well that our Earth's atmosphere is divided into several different kinds of layers, say troposphere, stratosphere, then mesosphere, ionosphere, etc. So this again increase in the atmosphere starts at, you can see that it is maximum again at 50 kilometer. So this behavior of sound speed and temperature, which is first decreases and then increase and reaches maximum to at 50 kilometer, was marked as a some kind of a distinctive behavior in the from physics point of view of this atmosphere. And Committee on Space Research decided long back that okay, above the 50 kilometer we will consider the space. So basically from physics point of view as well as from the science point of view, space begins 50 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. You can also notice that above the 50 kilometer, again temperature and sound speed reduces, and then again further about say 80, 90 kilometer, they again go higher. So they are keep on, dancing from minimum side to maximum and maximum to minimum, etc. But 50 kilometer is some kind of a line marked to begin for the space. The other question, what is space? Generally, people think that it is empty, but it is not empty. It is full of two particular constituents. One is radiation from the large number of stars, etc., and the second is particles. So the charged particles, which also there are a lot of gases also. So dust, we say, or gases, then radiation, particles, which are form of, matter, and they are form of energy. So whole universe is full of energy also. So now the next generally questions which people ask to me is why to go into space? Why can we not do everything from sitting on the Earth? There are a large number of telescopes, etc. But yes, we can do, but always there is some certain limit. And the first thing which we get an opportunity from by going into space is to improve our knowledge about our own neighboring planets, which otherwise we can only see through the telescope, but we cannot see their surface, whether it is like our Earth and what is inside contained, etc. And similarly, other celestial objects with high resolution. So basically, if we want to study with high resolution in space as well as in time, we need to go outside. Means the branches of the study of this cosmology, just like astrophysics and astronomy, we need to go into space. And there are many examples of many satellites, just like Hubble Space Telescope and like ultraviolet telescopes, Chandra X-ray mission, etc., which have delivered a very new insights of the universe. The other part is a space technology part, such as remote sensing, communication, which actually we have already seen the benefits of remote sensing and communication. And I will touch on these 2 points in little more also during my presentation. The third thing is the space may be used for power generation and future development of new generation technology. Say, for example, people talk that we can use the moon as a powerhouse. So is it possible? This is possible only when we go on the moon and we develop technology over there. Some people talk that we can use the moon and other planets for launching the satellites from there itself, so we can save a lot of money. So that is also possible when we go there and explore the planets. So these three things, that is understanding, that is the basic sciences of the universe. We need to go outside to, for benefits of the human life, that is remote sensing, communication, and for future generation technology, we need to go outside. The first question then people ask, okay, so if we have understood this universe to some extent, then every time the question comes, when this universe started, or the universe was like as it is seen on today. There are many theories of the origination or origin of the universe, or formation of the universe. But for example, the steady state is one theory in which people say that the universe was like as it is on today, and it will remain same in the future also. But the more generally accepted theory is the Big Bang theory, which says that about 13.8 billions of years, 13.8 billions of years, there was a very whole material, a large amount of material, or I should say some kind of a highly dense material was concentrated in a very small micro egg, and that egg exploded. It exploded at that time. This lots of material came outside, and there was an inflation. It spread over everywhere. So universe actually started with this kind of a bang, and this thing generally is talked not in 1 second or 10 seconds. Whatever I told, that it is measured with the Planck time, and that is 10 to the power minus 43 second. Means it is much, 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 much smaller than a second, or even what we generally call nanosecond or femtosecond. Much, much smaller than that. So in early at that time, because of this blast, at least some light was there, but that light could not continue for large time. But during that time, when this explosion took place, that is from Planck epoch time to the almost up to 10 second, lots of particles, including the, muons, electrons, then protons, neutrons, they all were actually formed, and they started to mix with each other. So somehow at that time, the first formation of hydrogen started. And from that time, the hydrogen actually spread over everywhere. But unfortunately, after 370,000 years, that is 370,000 years after the Big Bang, there was no light. That is, whole sky became transparent, and no photon radiations were there. And this continued for almost 1 billion year, or maybe even more than that. And that period, starting from 370,000 years to 1 billion year, it is known as Dark Age. But after that, see, these particles which were formed, they recombine, and then they were danced at certain places. So first, actually, we can say the star formation process started at one place where the density was somehow concentrated at one location, and where the density highly, the particles concentrated at that location, so temperature goes up and pressure also goes up. So in such condition, the thermonuclear fusion reactions start. That is, hydrogen is converted into the helium. So like that kind of reaction started, but this took lot of time. And so first star formation process started almost 400 million later to that Big Bang. So then this process started, and you can see from that this is the timeline, and after that the continuously large number of stars at different places in this universe of at that time they started. So you can see in this picture is a x-axis is a time, and various events have been shown. You can see from this time mark line to all the way up to here as of today, the large number of stars are being formed, and dust particles, gases, so they all are conglomerating at different locations, and large dust stars, etc., when they mix up at some places, that large number of stars then formation begins, and that is the galaxy. So galaxies started later on, but different stars already started at different locations. So finally what we see as on today is large number of galaxies in the universe, but they are separating away from each other also. So this thing started in order to balance the energy systems, and we still but missing some energy, and that missing energy is known as dark energy. So somehow there are different theories, but it is interesting to understand this whole universe, which we have not yet fully understood. So in order to do that, we need to go outside. Now the question arises, out of this whole big bundle, big I mean, a large number of stars where the sun is there, how the sun started. What I tell you is that there was some kind of a gas dust which we call as a solar nebula, and it was rotating. And whenever the rotation is there in this, then the mass starts to come to the shape of spherical because of the gravitational pull. And so almost 4.5 billions of years before the present time, almost such kind of a story took place, that the solar nebula was under very high rotation, and as a consequence of that, the gravitational force was there, and finally it took the shape, and then the sun started. But in the sun, now the mass which was concentrated at the core, that sun actually start very high temperature was generated over there, and as a consequence now the gravitational force. But once the temperature is very high, as I told, then the thermonuclear fusion reaction started. So radiation started to come out. So there was some kind of a finally balance between the radiation and gravitational force. And that gives the current shape of the sun, where the actual diameter of the sun, 1400, almost 700,000 kilometer. So this, or radius, we can say 700,000 kilometer. Now the sun basically undergoes to the main sequence on the HR diagram. I will show you. So presently the sun is somewhere here at 4.5 billions of years, and the sun, it is expected that it will further go to about a same time scale. But what will happen? Whether it will continue like that? No. Dear friends, it is not possible like that, because the hydrogen which is inside, it is continuously, as I told, it is burning through the thermonuclear fusion reactions. And it will go finally end and turning into the core, into the helium. Once the core becomes helium, then the whole radiation which is coming outside, so there will be imbalance between the gravitational force and the radiative force, and the much energy will come out from the core. So outside the core, actually the reaction will start, and then what will happen around this time, that is 8 or 9 billions of years, the sun will start to expand. So means because the radiation is going outside, and then material is going outside, temperature inside will become very high, almost current temperature, let us say, of the visible disk of the sun is about 6,000 degree Kelvin. It will go into the more than 10,000 or 20,000 degree, and so it will be very difficult even to stay on the earth. But finally, when the outer atmosphere, outer envelope will be too much, then it will split up into the two part, and outer will go outside, and the shape where this outer envelope is very high with a temperature is known as red giant, and when it will split up, then the only core will remain, and that core is known as white dwarf, and it will keep on shrinking, and finally the sun or any stars like that will die. If I talk on same thing, or considering large number of stars, then, and if I want to study those stars, so we generally call it a Hertzsprung Russell diagram. In this, y-axis is the luminosity, x-axis is the temperature, or the spectrum color code is there. For example, O, B, A, F, G, K, M. So you can see here the stars which have very high surface temperature, they also reveal the blue color. But as the temperature of the surface of any given star reduces or comparatively lower than this blue star, then it will be white, and then it will be yellow, etc. So large number of stars in our Milky Way or anywhere, you can always study them through the spectroscopy and find their color, and you can put them on this picture. Somewhere they will adjust over there. And this belt is known as the main sequence of this HR diagram. Those stars which shift away, say for example, red giants or super red giants, or on the other with the lower temperature, white dwarfs, etc., they will be split up on the other sides of this main sequence. Currently our sun is somewhere here, you can see, and it is under the G type, that is spectral shape, G type and G2V. So it is basically yellow kind of stars. Now it is the story of the sun at 4.5 billion years. After the 4.5 billion year, the sun may go on this side, and once it is finished, that outer envelope, then it will go to the white dwarf. So this is what happens to the sun or with the other kinds of stars. Now, if you see where is the location, the other question comes to our mind, where is the location of our sun along with the whole family solar system? So if you see in our own Milky Way, basically what we see is only this branch, this small part of this our Milky Way. That's why it always appears only like a belt. But really it is our shape of the whole, our Milky Way is just like a spiral arms, full of spiral arms or starfish kind of a system. So sun is here from the center of the galaxy, almost 30,000 light years away from it, and it moves around the, that is, it revolves around this center of the Milky Way, about in 26 crore years, which is also known as Brahmand Varsha cosmic year. This has been discovered by several hundreds and thousands of years ago. You can see the different arms which are known as by various our zodiacs rashis, Sagittarius and Cygnus, Pegasus, which are, and you also know the Mrig Nakshatra Orion, so the Mrig Nakshatra will be somewhere here. So all these things, so basically the galaxy also rotates, and the galaxy rotates also in the clockwise like this, and the sun also rotates at its own center, but it revolves around the galaxy. If I have to talk now, going further into the detail, whether the sun is alone in the solar system or there are many other objects. So sun is basically a star, and the major mass of the whole solar system is concentrated inside the sun. So other planets or other all objects, even if they align on one side, they cannot do anything to the sun. This is the fact. Okay. So the sun, basically we can say it is a hydrogen star, and around the sun, currently there are 8 planets which go around. So one constituent is the planets which orbits the sun, in which we have, say, the Mercury, Venus, Earth, okay, Mars and Jupiter, then Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, Pluto, etc. But Pluto is currently turned out and it is known as the dwarf planet. Now between Mars and Jupiter, if you see, between Mars, there are a large number of small objects, which basically due to lack of their mass, they are not spherical and they have different kind of shapes. In addition to that, the many planets have moons, some planets do not have. So what astronomers did, they divided the planets into 2 parts, inner planets and outer planets. So inner planets means the planets which are below this belt, okay, that is Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars. And outside Mars, that is Jupiter, then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Saturn, Saturn also, they all are the outer planets. Other than these planets, moons, almost as on today, about 219 moons have been discovered. There are many other objects like small objects, very small objects, IC objects, I should say, and they travel all the way from very long distance and from very long away, known as Oort's cloud, they come in this close to the sun, and they then fly like a with a tail, known as comets, and the other small objects which keep on wandering around the sun, meteorites, asteroids, etc. So these all the planets. Now there was a question that how these planets orbit distribution is there. So long back, the two scientists, two astronomers, Titius and Bode, they actually derived some kind of a formula, a very simple formula, and they told that let us take one arbitrary number 4 plus x is the distance, okay, of its orbit to determine, and divide by 10, and whatever the number will come, that much astronomical unit will be the distance from the sun. So the first number, it was considered, okay, we will just somehow we will start with 0. So let us say 4 plus 0 means only 4, and divide by 10 means 0.4 astronomical unit is the distance of the Mercury, that is first planet from the sun. That is it's a radius of the orbit. Similarly, next is 3, so 4 plus 3, that is 7, divided by 10, so 0.7. So 0.7 is AU, astronomical unit, is the distance of the Venus. And then 6 plus 4, 10, divided by 10, 1, that is the Earth, that is 1 astronomical unit. So like that, it is the formula was successfully working except in the discovery of the Neptune. But for otherwise, for all other astronomical objects, by and large, it worked very well. So I would like to motivate young students to read about the solar system in greater detail, as well as about this Titius-Bode's law, etc., and about the spectroscopy, which will give better physics knowledge. Let me talk the largest asteroid which move around the sun. Its name is Mahild. Its diameter is about 50 kilometers. But you can see in this, that its a structure, its a shape is not spherical, because loss of the mass, it is a very, very small, tiny object related in when we talk in terms of astronomical distances, etc., or astronomical size. So these are also known as minor planets, but its shape is just like a jaw. And then, as I told, there are comets, and comets are very interesting objects. They start very far away in the solar system, as I told, Oort's cloud, and they are very, very small icy object because they are very far. So the whole dust and gas is deposited at one place, and when they start to come toward the sun, then because of the radiation pressure, they melt, and then with the radiation pressure, they form the tail. Up to 50 years back, dear friends, actually it was not known. But as I told in the beginning, we need to go to into the space above the Earth to understand many other science also. And the X-ray mission actually detected that the comets have not only one tail, which is generally known as a dust tail, but it has a charged particle tail known as plasma tail. And you can see how large it is. And there are many, many comets, and particularly you might have heard about Hale comet, which is very big. So the comets, the main core or nucleus, which may be about 10 to 100 kilometers in size, but the mass is so much highly thickly concentrated over there that when it comes toward the sun, then it's a mass, that is dust and gas, it spreads. There are a large number of comets which come and fell down into the sun itself, and they die over there. But sometimes some big comets, they come and lost. I should say that they forget or they deviate from their main orbit, and sometimes because of the collision of the orbits, they fall down on the planets also. So there is a history that many times such comets fell down on our Earth also. and whatever the kind of life was there on the earth, it was actually the completely destroyed. And that is the what we call as extinction on the earth. So 5 extinctions already took place on the earth, and in one of them was the extinction of dinosaur. And now you know that the comets also are known when the dinosaurs were finished, but the comet which killed them, it brought some another kind of the soup of life, and now the human beings actually took it over the earth, and now we are enjoying this our wonderful blue planet. So comets actually play a big role in destroying and creating the life. So the question comes that once we came on this earth, so we are only the people. Are we alone in the whole universe? So there, this question was asked some 100 years back also. But almost some 50, 70 years back, it was considered very seriously. And there was a project started known as a Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI. Under that project, various kind of theoretical and experimental work started. So first question was asked, what is the habitable zone where the habitability is possible? In this picture, therefore, I want to show you in the y-axis, the mass of the different stars is shown. And on the x-axis, radius of the planetary orbit that it goes. So it is some kind of a ratio, and that suitable ratio, once it is there and it passes through, that is the habitable zone. You can see here that any star whose mass is very, very small, just like a 0.5 solar mass, then it's actually that radius of any object where the habitable life is possible, it is somewhere close to that star. But when the one solar mass, that sun, then it crosses that the earth is actually at the suitable location, very close to Venus and the Mars, etc. But the earth is most suitable. If the mass is larger, then it is away. Why it happens so? Because the suitable temperature, suitable pressure, etc. are also the important factors. And they actually define that how much temperature on that planet where in order to grow the life, evolve the life, grow the life, nurture the life is required. So the lot of such kind of a habitable zone planets, which we also call exoplanets. So exoplanets discovery started almost 40, 50 years back, and now thousands of exoplanets have been discovered. A few systems I would like to show here, that this is basically our own solar system, and the solar system has 1 or 2 exoplanets. So you can see most known exoplanets are here in our, then whatever I'm showing is in our own galaxy, and microlensing technique has been used to reveal and to discover the exoplanets. So many have been discovered. And so all these bright systems which you see on this screen, that bright dots I should say, they are the solar systems or a star system in which such a exoplanet exists and where the life is possible. I would like to take to you, these kind of systems are many in our own galaxies, but I would like to take to you to our philosophical aspect. You know, in our Hindu philosophy or Jain philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, the one word which is known as Jambudvipa. Means Jambudvipa means group of solar systems. But they told that group of solar system where in such solar system at least one planet is always there which has a life. So in our own Jambudvipa, such kind of a Dvipa, about 7 or 8 have been described. But in one Jambudvipa, 7 zones, that is 7 solar systems have been identified by them and name was given. For example, Bharat Kshetra, Mahavidya Kshetra, Airavat Kshetra, Ramanya Kshetra, Hiranya Kshetra, Hemvrat and Harivansh For sure. And what we have done along with our one student, we have identified these solar systems, that is these planets of their solar system, that is star, etc., with the modern name or modern astronomy name. The Bharat Kshetra means our Earth, and we know our own sun solar system. For example, the Mahavidya Kshetra, that is Kepler 22b in Kepler 22 solar system. The Kepler 22 is the star, and that has the various kinds of planets, and Kepler 22b is a planet which has a Mahavidya. Similarly, Eravat, that is Kepler 452b, that is the planet, and main star is Kepler 452. Similarly, Ramanya Kshetra, that is Kepler, another star, then Tau for the Hiranya, etc. We may be wrong, but this is the on what basis, you can ask me a question on what basis we have done. So we have done actually based on various kind of parameters, and these parameters I would like to go a little bit to tell you in detail. That the first thing here in the on the this first column, all the objects which, so at least I am covering here not all the kshetras but three to give you example. The second is the main star of which that planet is the object. Then the star, what is the spectral type? Because generally it has been observed by the astronomers and scientists that the G type star or the M type stars, K type stars, they have, if they have exoplanets, then there is a better possibility for the life evolution. Then the mass relative to the sun, the radius relative to the sun, then the flux, that is the luminosity which is coming relative to sun, and the effective temperature on the surface, that is like relative to our earth, and then how much period of rotation revolution around that star, and the distance from the main star, etc. So and this distance is in the light years, not in the kilometers, etc. We know that the distance between sun and earth is 8 minutes and 33 seconds only it takes the light to come over here. So for earth means Bharat Kshetra, the already we know the sun is our main star, and the spectral type it is G2V, mass, solar mass 1, because it is relative to that. Then the radius relative to the sun is 1, and then flux relative to sun, so 1, and 255 degree means 18 degree is our surface. Generally we talk temperature and rotation is about 365 days. So similarly in other, where Mahavidya Kshetra I told that Kepler 22, it is G5V star. And then I have shown, because not many things are known very well relative to the mass, but it is 20.4. And you now notice that it is very, very large mass body. And if it is large mass body, then it should be it should be, distance should be very, very large of the object, that is planet, from the main, and it is 619 light years distance from the this thing. So similarly, you can see the Eravat Kshetra, that is G2V again star, and temperatures and revolution around that, it is almost close to our Earth, and so there is a better possibility of life. Scientists have discovered that the total about 6 solar systems from the G spectral type stars in our Milky Way have been discovered, and they have better, possibility of the life. Similarly, in K type, 15 exoplanets have been discovered so far, and out of that, 12 exoplanets are likely of habitable candidates. On the other hand, because M-type stars already surface temperature is very, very low, that is, they are the cool stars. However, 28 exoplanets have been discovered, but out of that, only 2 appear as a suitable for the habitable zones. So this is what kind of current status is there. But out of our galaxy, there may be another thousands or millions of planets, exoplanets may exist. So whole universe, we can say, is full of life also at many, many locations. Now, what are the benefits? That is the question was there, why we should go into the space. So the benefits, let us see, related to our remote sensing. You know that recent, a big disaster event took place in the Uttarakhand. Just on the 6th February, you know that the big glacier was split up, and then so such kind of a climate prediction and disaster management is possible only through the satellites, and nowadays it is being done through that. You know that this picture, it is a Choraveri glacier. You know, it is almost a few hundreds of kilometers away from the Kedarnath, and in that glacier, some split up was there of about zero point 0.2 kilometers square. These images were sent by our Indian Space Research Organization, which took, and it is at the altitude of about 5,000, more than 5,000 kilometer. And even this small scar that split up actually caused a big chaos. And this whole dust started to come down and then started to deposit down, and then finally, and I have shown here the scale also, that this much is the 50 kilometer. This whole is even this much slice, which out of that whole glacier is about 200 kilometer in wide. And then what happened? You know that this is Tapavahumi, where this rainy, I have shown, Dholi Ganga is there, then Alaknanda is there, and this another thing is Rishi Ganga. So these three things where they meet together, and that location, that glacier came down, and finally the slowly fresh ice was being started. But the whole thing, you see, the chaos started at this location at the Tapobhumi, and this was big. But fortunately, I want to say, and I wish to claim also, that this is the advantage of our space technology. We could save the people this time. Otherwise, you know that in 2013, that 2011, when Kedarnath event took place, more than 30,000 people actually died. Although at that time also remote sensing satellites were there, etc., but the event actually took place in the early morning, and then the water came because of the three things happened, that is the earthquake and the dam crack, etc. So there are many advantages, and similarly now the communication technology is another advantage. I would like to tell you the another advantage of remote sensing as well as the communication technology. Nowadays we have large number of new generation of infrared sensor satellites, and the detectors are there, which have the capability to detect the fires, etc., and many other phenomena, smokes, etc. I would like to remind many of you who are aware or who were born before the 2000 or in 1990, that there was a terrorist attack on USA, and in the New York World Trade Center was attacked by the aircraft from the terrorist, and the whole World Trade Center was on fire. And this fire was detected at that time by our Indian remote sensing satellites. And we shared through the communication technology, now I tell you, to the USA. And this thing, then many, I mean, other measures post this fire were taken seriously, etc. Many other defense things were taken. So many defense technology also use nowadays infrared sensors. So what I wish to say, that not only the agriculture support remote sensing applications are there, not only for the oceans, etc., or many other land properties, forest properties, but also for this kind of, I mean, disasters, or I should say natural disasters and calamities, we can use the satellites. At the same time, you know that for the faster communication, that after 3G, 4G came, and after now 4G, 5G is about to come, etc. So all this faster communication helps even from the satellite also taking download the data. So we have many kinds of applications. So you may ask question to me whether we have achieved such high technology things, or still we are way behind. What I would like to say to you, that from Indian Space Research Organization point of view or Indian point of view, now we are actually stands up with proud. For example, you see, we started, nobody taught us. We started to build the rocket, you see, from the technology which Tipu Sultan taught us. And then we learned many things and we were not having facility. We were taking the rocket on the cycles, no roads were there. Even the Apple satellite was taken into the bullock cart. But from then, there itself as a milestone, we started the technology development, and now you can see that we developed space launching vehicle 3, which we got success, then augmented space launching vehicle, then polar satellite launching vehicle. Sorry. You know that we have done large number of success using the PSLV. And then now we have seen the success, great success we have marked is of GSLV, that is a geosynchronous space launching vehicle. I would like to show you a movie of GSLV success design and development. This we successfully launched just in 2017, and then now we have marked a big success over there. And we also could not only learn simply development or design of the rocket, but also the fuel, etc., and many other components. So almost all parts of the rocket technology now we have learned, and we stand on our own foot. You can see that the rocket development is one thing, but launching of such a large, heavy satellite is also another technology. And this was done at our own launching vehicle center, that is Sriharikota Space Launching Vehicle Center. And you can see another technology in this, that after launching the many other things, say removal of the heat shield, etc., we successfully could do it. And you will see in this video the various kinds of successful steps which we could achieve. You can see that. So separation of the 1x1 engine also took place very satisfactorily and successfully. And then the mission director also says that so first operation complete. And now if we see, so in this, I mean, our theoretical calculations and experimental observations of this altitude were very close to each other within the error limit. See, and perform. And you can see here that now the heat shield is the most important part. It should separate it away, and within the error limits, everything went very well and very successfully. And you will see that now heat shield removal separation successfully done. So the next, this happened in 2017. Earlier to that, we got the rocket from Russia and we gave the name GSAT-2, that is Geosynchronous Satellite 2 in the series. And I was given a very important opportunity. I got it, and I was given responsibility to design and develop solar X-ray spectrometer at PRL. And that was supposed to be launched on this GSAT-2 satellite at 36,000 700 kilometer. And basically in this spectrometer, we employed for the first time the two new detectors. One is silicon detector, that is small tube, and the larger, the CZT detector, cadmium zinc telluride detector. And this was mounted on some kind of sun solar system tracking mechanism, which was continuously moving along with the, keeping the sun at its center, just like a guiding system. And this was then successfully, all the electronics, etc., were mounted, everything was tested and mounted on the satellite GSAT-2, and it was launched on the 8th May 2003. And this is the history in the Indian Space Research Organization, that any payload worked till the life of the satellite, that is for the 8 years, starting from 2003 to 2011, it worked very successfully till the life of the, but unfortunately the fuel of the satellite finished. But in 8 years, we got large number of data. You can see that this was also launched very precisely and perfectly in the orbit, geosynchronous orbit. And we got the data. The aim was actually to discover whether during the solar flares, enough temperature goes so that the iron and the iron nickel line can be seen. So in this picture, I'm showing this plot. The x-axis is the time, y-axis is the intensity of the solar flares. You can see even the very small nano flare and micro flares we can see. Then the big flares also can be seen in different energy bands in the X-ray. The most important discovery employing these observations was the discovery, as I told, that yes, we could discover the iron line and the iron nickel line. And because of this discovery, the PRL sent the astronomical telegram and based on finally all the various kinds of observation, I was given the fellowship of the Royal Astronomical Society. India not only went to the sun, but also the first, our mission was planned for the moon also. So in November 2008, the moon mission, that is Chandrayaan-1, was launched. And you can see in this left picture that the many big craters are there. And at the rim, bright areas you can see over there. And this bright area, particularly in this Metus crater over here, it is about 117 kilometers. And like that, many new craters were observed. Anyway, my student, he used another kind of mission, but here on the moon, Chandrayaan, there was another payload was there, which is known as Moon Mineralogy Mapper, M3 or MQ. This took data in 4 different kinds of parameters. One, you can say that this A, albedo, B, its absorption, C is temperature, it was measured, and then the mineralogy. And finally, from all these observations, from the spectroscopy, the moon mission Chandrayaan-1 first time in the world discovered that there is a possibility of water, and they discovered the signatures of water on the moon, particularly near the high latitude areas. You can see here, that the red line is the OH hydroxyl ion is there, then the higher density, then is water is also there, this red line. So the green line is this OH, and the blue is the ice. So as a function of density, if I plot this, then you know that the hydroxyl is like a gas, low density, then the water is slightly higher density, and ice is higher density. So as a function of wavelength, this is the spectrum, the reflectance as a function of the wavelength. And you can see the clear-cut absorption of this various kinds of possibility of the water. And this was very well, recognized, many papers in Nature, Science, and many other journals. what my student took the data of craters from LROC, that is the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Camera, and we studied large number of more than I think 274 known craters, and we discovered 125 unknown craters. And we measured the diameter, and from that, by formula, we discovered that how much depth it is there. And we found for the first time that there is a scaling law, that is a linear law between the depth and diameter. So if there is a larger depth, means the crater has a larger diameter also. And if even we go over here only, then also it exists. And this enabled us to explore, to find out that what was the impact material, that is because the crater are formed because of the fall of the asteroids, meteorites, comets, etc. We studied as a function of latitudes also and longitude, and we found that near the equator or at the higher latitude side, the larger number of craters on the moon are there. But our major discovery was about the linearity, that scaling law, in the unknown craters also. Similarly, India went to the moon also, that is the Indian Mars mission. This Mangalyaan, this took flight on 2013. But I told you that this PSLV was some kind of a small horse, but did major things, major discoveries. Chandrayaan 1, Mangalyaan, etc. This Mangalyaan, it took the 5 payloads, the Mars color camera, Lyman alpha photometer, and thermal infrared imaging spectrograph, methane sensor, and Mars exospheric neutral composition analyzer. Anyway, so Mars actually, this mission gave one very good information about the possibility, and that possibility near Olympus Mons, there are some clouds are there, and these orographic clouds were observed by our mission at 2 different times, and it was measured that there is a possibility of water vapor over there. This gives some kind of a information that there is a possibility of life. So in this plot, actually as a function of latitude, there is a cloud area is how much it covers, etc. And 2 different types, blue and red, different time slots of observation. So now I'm sure that Perseverance, which has been sent by the NASA, it may also discover some signatures of life on the Mars. The next mission which was sent by ISRO is the ASTROSAT, and the ASTROSAT was composed of many telescopes, including ultraviolet imaging telescopes, then the soft X-ray telescope, hard X-ray imaging telescope employing the again cadmium zinc telluride imagers, etc., and this sky scanning monitor, etc. And then it also has already published more than 100 papers. Lot of research has been, exploited from these observations. Now, it is very interesting that our Indian Space Research Organization is planning Gaganyaan, in which they are planning to send a man, that is an astronaut, on the satellite. So that will be the first satellite from Indian side with an astronaut. Then we are also planning a mission to Venus and another mission to Mars. Then next year only, or maybe this year only, Chandrayaan 3. Chandrayaan 3 is nothing but the part which was actually not successful of Chandrayaan 2. So it will be only now a rover inside, and then this again it will go and measure the surface level mineralogy, etc. But the basic, another very important achievement will be there by the ISRO. We are planning to launch a solar satellite dedicated to the sun only, namely Aditya, and it will go to L1, that is Lagrangian point. What is Lagrangian point? The Earth-Sun system, Sun-Earth system has about 5 Lagrangian points. And Lagrangian point means the point at which the sun and earth at that orbit point, that is Lagrangian point, they balance the gravitational forces to each other. And if a small body like a satellite is kept at that location, then it will rotate or completely it will revolve around the Earth, okay, and in 24 hours, and it will be keeping point to the sun only. So, for example, when it will be kept on L1, then it will always see the sun 24 hours. But if it is kept on the L2, that is on the other side of the Earth, then it will see the stars where you want to do, just like a Chandraya and the Hubble Space Telescope, etc. If it is kept on L3, then we can always see all the time the backside of the sun. So we can predict also what is going to happen in next 13, 14 days. L3 and L4 are when we want to see high latitudes, what is happening on the sun and the coronal mass ejections or the how the sunspots are being formed, etc. Then L3 and L4 are used. With all this information, I humbly express my sincere thanks to Space Education and Research Foundation to give me an opportunity to present our this talk on space science and technology. I say thank you very much to Professor Harimbom Vats for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much for your kind attention to my presentation.